Definitely not tiny though, because today I was just speaking with another co-presenter who is going to join Lily and talk about the Interfaith Care for Creation Community Gardens. It was a project started about maybe almost 5 years ago. 2009 now. And I've kind of forgotten. Thank you, Lily. Um, and it was a project that began because the Columbia Climate Change Coalition helped the Interfaith Care for Creation group get started, and these kinds of feeding the hungry are things that faith communities like to do and do well, and all of the faith communities, if you look at the different faiths, and even those folks who maybe don't come from a particular faith or maybe have, a completely different take on that, most of us can see that we need to have a proper respect and stewardship for the planet and the earth and the plants, the animals, and the humans as well. So a stewardship kind of project came that was about both feeding the hungry but also taking care of the earth. And I'm going to let Lily talk about that mostly. But the individual who was going to join us today had to drive someone to a funeral here at the last minute who needed to go and do a proper family goodbye. So he couldn't join us. He is Jim Kruger, and he was the president at the time of the congregation Beth Shalom. The idea for these gardens were to partner different faith communities so that they could work together, the ones that didn't have any land to grow food on with ones that did have land to grow food. And so that they could not only partner the different faiths, but, partner in that way and really bring some energy to the garden. And Jim Kruger was saying that this garden has been wildly successful and that Lily is the driving force behind it, because before Lily entered the picture as the head garden person from Newman Center, St. Thomas More Newman Center, garden leader, I guess we call each other, don't we? And so she was really amazing to, bring all these troops to a garden that did exist prior to that at the congregation Beth Shalom. But it was kind of just losing energy, and the congregation just kind of wasn't keeping up with it. But it's been, as Jim says, wildly successful, and in large part due to Lily. So that's as much introduction as Lily needs, but she has a great story to tell us, both with the gardens, more about the gardens, and her own story as well. And I will say one thing, we talked about food forests on the flyer. This particular garden that she'll tell you about, is a great example of a food forest, one type of a food forest, because they can look all different sorts of ways. But it's an example that we do have in our community right now of a food forest. So I'm going to let Lily take the microphone now.
Do you want me to stand up here?
Yeah, you can do whatever feels good to you, Lily. This is so
Does it go
tall.
slow? Okay.
How could the camera go? There we go.
Hi. I was born in Hong Kong, and I grew up there. So um, I'm a very lousy speaker, so I'm just going to read from what I wrote and tell you something about the Interfaith Garden. There's nothing that makes me happier to work in a garden where people of different faiths get together to plant vegetables and fruit for the poor without using harsh chemicals that would pollute the environment. That way we can be good stewards of both God's people and the good earth that he gave us. When people heard me say that we'll grow organic food for the poor, they called me a purist, probably meaning that I am impractical. Surely, using chemicals is easier and quicker than practicing organic. Spraying the weeds with Roundup and herbicide or pesticide will kill the unwanted vegetation and bugs almost immediately. But when I think of what long-term effects it will have on the environment, I won't be able to sleep well at night, thinking of all the poison that will go into our groundwater, causing cancer to people and animals, or of all the beneficial insects like bees that we kill along the way. Let me tell you, shortcuts are not always the best. I found out firsthand that if we do the right things, the result will be more satisfactory and fulfilling. For years, my husband and I hired a lawn company to take care of our lawn for us. They used chemicals to spray our weeds and fertilize our grass, and we didn't care as long as we didn't have to lift a finger ourselves. Then, one hot, dry summer, when we came home from vacation, we found the lawn had patches that had been burnt by the chemical fertilizer that the company used. So I fired the company and decided to take care of the lawn myself. Not knowing what to do, I went to a workshop sponsored by the city on lawn care. I was particularly taken in by one guy who does organic lawn care professionally. He said it takes patience and time to do organic, but it will pay off in the long run. Sure enough, I went home and did it the organic way of lawn care. My husband and I pull weeds by hand, one small area at a time. I call it divide and conquer. We aerated the lawn, overseeded, and put good soil and compost on it. Then when the grass became more established, I applied organic feed and wheat, which is corn gluten. The first 2 years, our lawn looked awful, still with holes from the burn and weeds coming out of nowhere. My husband said we were wasting our time and money and thought we should give up. I kept at it, ignored his plea, and I told him to keep pulling dandelions, one at a time. Then came spring of the 3rd year. Our lawn looked beautiful and dense, and guess what? Very few dandelions. My husband was amazed at what happened. Now it has become the most beautiful lawn on our street. I was talking about my front lawn. Now my backyard is another story. Because it is a huge area, I cannot give as much care as I do the front yard. I still do it the organic way, but I learned not to be a perfectionist. So it has clover, but clover gives nitrogen to my grass, and that's good. So it has a few dandelions, but dandelion roots and leaves have medicinal values and are good in salad and tea. As long as it don't take over my whole backyard and looks decent from my deck and far away, I'm happy. So with that in mind, I do the same thing with the interfaith garden. We do not use chemicals and try to do everything as organic as we can. Obviously, we can't afford to buy all organic seeds and seedlings unless folks in the community help by donating them to us. But we are trying to make our own compost and learn to use organic practices like companion planting, intercropping, plant rotation, trap crop, cover crop, etc. We are fortunate enough to have one of our Newman parishioners, Tom Kudron, who is a USDA specialist to help us. First, he put traps in our garden to find out the amount of beneficial and harmful insects. After one season, he concluded that we did not have a lot of harmful insects, but we did not have enough of the beneficial insects either. So every spring, he releases beneficial insects into our garden, and we try to plant some flowers to keep them around. Last year was a very hard year for gardeners. Our plants were under stress by the drought and intense heat. We found our cucumbers, squash, melons, and even okras were swarmed with cucumber beetles. So I went to Tom, and he told us to burn the plant remains that have the cucumber beetles in it. Then in the spring, plant the squash family in a different area, and also plant a trap crop to attract most of the beetles and kill them right there. Whether this will work or not, we don't know yet, but we are giving it a try this spring. Another thing we do is to plant some radish and pyrethrum daisies around the squash family to keep the cucumber beetles away. An organic garden presents some problems, but if we keep at it, like what I did with my lawn, I know that we can eventually succeed and grow healthy and strong vegetables and fruit for those who are less fortunate than we are. In fact, in spite of the bad summer that we had and the invasion of the cucumber beetles, we harvested a total of 1,700 pounds of organic produce for the food pantry, our highest yield yet in spite of these challenges. In 2009, when we started the Interfaith Garden, our harvest was 500 pounds. The next year, the harvest actually went down to 330 pounds. Being disappointed by the loss in the production, we sought outside help. First, we decided to build some raised beds to solve the drainage problems in the garden, especially in the spring. So I went to a few of my husband's students at MU and asked them to help. Not only did they come, but I also brought a whole engineering honor society to build them for us as a service project. Ever since then, we have engineering honor societies to help us start the garden in the spring and put it to bed in the fall. In 2009, we had a lousy makeshift fence and gate that did anything but keep the deer away. So after a few years of sharing our food with the critters, I decided to go to the Boy Scouts and asked if one of them could build a fence for us as his Eagle Scout project. Finally, we found Daniel Lee, who along with his family and troop built us a beautiful 8-foot tall fence in the spring of 2012. This year, we have a very wet spring. One workday after another got canceled. But fortunately, we had Tau Beta Pi, one of the MU Engineering Honor Society, and a group of about 24 people from Father Totten Catholic High School, including teachers, parents, and kids, who offered to do our spring planting for us as the service project. I always tell people that without their help, we would not have a garden this year. And this is just a fraction of what other community groups and individuals do for us. So you see, the success of our Interfaith Garden depends not only on the hard work of our volunteers from CBS, Congregation Beth Shalom, or Newman Center, but also on community efforts. People ask me what kind of things we plant in our garden. I think our Interfaith Garden is a good example of a good forest. We have lettuce, spinach, radish, mustard greens, turnips, beets, chards, carrots, cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, potatoes, onions, many varieties of herbs, pole and bush beans, pepper, tomatoes, okra, squash, watermelon, cantaloupes, cucumber, summer and winter squash, and garlic. Besides strawberries and a walnut tree which was already there when we had the garden, we also recently added 2 new pear and 2 apple trees, pawpaw tree, blackberries, rhubarb, and asparagus. Obviously, with a skeleton crew of about 12 to 14 regular working on 2 workdays every week, we have more than we can handle. So we are happy to have volunteers, even if they're not members of our faith communities. So if you know anybody who's interested, please let us know. So again, I say that Monta was giving me a lot of credit, but it's not about me. It's about all the people who have helped us from the community. And thank you.